Look at this ship. Before a single piece of cargo can move, the ship itself has to stop moving. And that same problem follows every load that comes after it. Steel rails, giant machinery, bridge sections, even a turbine lowered to the seabed. The machines get bigger, but lifting is rarely the hardest part. So what actually keeps these enormous loads under control from one transfer to the next? How does a port take control of a massive cargo operation before a crane ever touches the load? The answer begins with something even larger than the cargo itself, the ship. As Berge approaches Rotterdam, it still carries significant momentum. Even at reduced speed, a vessel of this size does not respond instantly. Every adjustment in heading or propulsion takes time to translate into movement. At sea, that inertia is manageable. Near a berth, it becomes a critical constraint. This is where tugboats become essential to the control system. Smit Panther, Smit Hudson, Smit Elbe, and Fairplay 24 take up positions around the bulk carrier. Each tug is assigned a specific role, not simply to pull, but to shape motion. By applying force at different points along the hull, they help slow the vessel, control its rotation, and stabilize its approach to the quay. On deck, the crew prepares the messenger line. Once the towing line is secured, the tug can transfer force directly into the ship's structure. At the same time, the vessel's own engine is brought into the maneuver. Dead slow astern is engaged during the stopping phase, allowing propulsion and tug assistance to work together. One system reduces forward motion, while the others refine direction and balance. The sequence unfolds in controlled stages. First, the ship is brought to a stop. Then it is carefully swung through a 180-degree turn away from the berth. Only after that rotation is complete does mooring begin. Each step removes a layer of uncertainty: forward speed, heading, lateral drift, and finally residual movement at the key. This precision is necessary because a ship of this scale cannot simply pivot freely. Tugboats reposition continuously, managing the stern and quarter, while the bridge team coordinates timing and thrust. The goal is not speed, but reduction of motion until the vessel behaves predictably within a confined space. Mooring provides the final constraint. A mooring boat delivers lines ashore, where winches and bollards secure them to the dock. As each line is tightened, the ship loses another degree of freedom. It is no longer an independent moving body, but part of a controlled system anchored to land. Only when that system is stable can the port begin the visible phase of the operation: cargo handling. The ship is now under control. The next challenge is ensuring the machinery that reaches into its holds can maintain that same level of precision. Berge is now secured. The next question is how one port machine can handle cargo that comes in completely different shapes. And that challenge begins at the working end. Once the ship is secured, the work passes to the machinery operating beside it. At Belfast Harbor, a large Mansonen material handler sits at the center of that next stage. Its long boom provides reach across the working area, while the wheeled base and outriggers create a stable platform close to the vessel. From the operator's cab, the machine can position a grab over cargo without moving the entire port around it. But reach alone does not solve the problem. A machine used for loose bulk material may later face steel, timber, coils, containers, or cargo with completely different lifting points. The hydraulic structure provides motion and force, but the end of the boom still has to make the correct physical connection with whatever is being moved. That connection is where versatility begins. Before machines like these can begin moving cargo, they may first become oversized cargo themselves. Here, two large Mansonen handlers are transported by sea. Their booms, gantry structures, and operating platforms now have to fit within the same logistics chain they were designed to serve. The reversal is useful. A cargo handling machine does not simply appear at the dock. It has to be transported, positioned, and integrated into the working area before it can handle anything else. Once in service, however, its real versatility depends on what can be connected to the boom. The quick coupler turns that requirement into a repeatable tool change. Close-up footage shows a worker disconnecting and reconnecting hydraulic lines, operating the coupling mechanism, and checking the locking components. Instead of treating the attachment as a permanent part of the machine, the coupler creates a standard interface between the boom and the tool below it. That matters because every change of cargo can demand a different contact method. The machine itself does not need to become a different crane. It needs a different working end. At that point, the question is no longer how much force the boom can generate, but how that force should enter the load. The range of attachments makes that difference visible. A container spreader approaches cargo from above and connects at defined lifting points. A coil clamp deals with an entirely different problem, a heavy cylindrical load that cannot simply be scooped up like loose material. Other lifting frames distribute force across several points, while tools for bundled wire or skidded products are shaped around the geometry of the cargo they are meant to handle. For logs, the requirement changes again. A grapple has to close around an irregular group of long objects while keeping the bundle together during the lift. With bulk material, the same general machine uses a completely different attachment, one designed to enter a pile, close around loose material, and carry it without fixed lifting points. The important distinction is the load path created by each tool. Before a lift begins, the cargo is supported by the ground, a ship, or another structure. Once the attachment takes over, that weight passes through the contact points, into the tool, through the coupler, and finally into the boom. If those contact points do not match the cargo, greater lifting force does not solve the underlying problem. A cylindrical coil needs restraint against rolling. A bundle of logs needs containment. A container needs force applied at known lifting locations. Loose material has no fixed lifting point at all. The machine supplies reach and motion. The attachment determines how that motion can be transferred into a particular load. Across scrapyards, docks, bulk piles, rock handling, and timber operations, the same idea repeats. The carrier remains recognizably similar while the working tool changes with the material. That flexibility solves the interface problem. The next complication comes from the cargo itself. Some loads flow, some bend, some roll. Others have to remain aligned across many meters. Each behavior changes the rules of the lift. Once the correct tool is attached, the next problem comes from the material itself. Inside a ship's hold, loose bulk cargo has no fixed shape and no defined lifting points. A grab can enter the pile, close around a volume of material, and transfer it in repeated cycles. Every movement, however, disturbs the surface below. Water sprays operate around the working area as the grab moves through the hold, helping manage the dust created as loose particles are displaced. Unlike a container or steel component, bulk cargo cannot be aligned before the lift. It has to be handled as a flowing material. Steel rails create almost the opposite problem. Here, the cargo is rigid, extremely long, and bundled together. The source operation handles railway sections approximately 25 meters long using two shore cranes working together. The geometry explains why. A long bundle cannot be treated like a compact load suspended from a single point. If one end moves faster than the other, the entire bundle can rotate or drift away from its intended path. Coordinated lifting allows the cranes to support different parts of the load, while workers monitor its position around the ship and dock. Weight still matters, but length now becomes the dominant constraint. The farther the cargo extends from its lifting points, the more carefully orientation has to be maintained. Instead of simply raising the load, the operation must preserve alignment throughout the transfer. The cargo has changed shape, so the lifting strategy changes with it. Bagged bulk cargo introduces another approach. A spreader bar allows multiple large bags to be suspended during one crane cycle rather than handled individually. Their lifting straps create repeatable connection points, while the frame distributes the group across a wider area. The advantage is not greater height or reach. It is throughput. More separate packages can move together during each transfer. Smaller bags create a different challenge once they enter the ship. Bundles of bagged sugar are lifted from the truck and transferred toward the cargo hold. From the crane's perspective, the motion is repetitive. Inside the hold, however, the job becomes much more manual. Workers receive the cargo and arrange the bags into position. Unlike loose bulk material, the individual packages retain their shape. Unlike steel rails, they do not require long lifting geometry. The challenge is building a stable, compact stow from large numbers of separate units. The crane manages movement through open space. Once the cargo reaches its destination, people determine the final arrangement. The transfer is only complete when each group is positioned so the next can be added without disrupting what has already been placed. For some cargo, the engineering problem continues after the hook stops moving. Steel coils make that final stage even more obvious. A coil may be stationary when the crane sets it down, but its cylindrical shape means that releasing the hook does not automatically create a stable storage condition. The roll stop system begins by defining the storage row itself. Workers measure the required length, position rail sections, install end spacers, connect the rails, check the fit, and cut the final section to length. Only after that foundation is prepared are the roll stops positioned along the rails. The support system is therefore built before the load arrives because the geometry of the cargo determines what must be waiting underneath it. When the crane lowers a coil into place, the roll stops provide defined support around the cylindrical load. Additional coils can then be arranged within the prepared storage system. The lift is finished, but the load still has to remain stable after its weight transfers from the lifting equipment to the floor. Across bulk material, rails, bags, and coils, weight is only one part of the problem. Shape, flexibility, surface, and final support all influence how cargo has to be moved. Soon, those constraints become harder to manage because the cargo becomes too large for ordinary routines. The principles used for rails, bags, and coils still apply until the cargo grows beyond the proportions of ordinary freight. Wind turbine tower sections are a good example. Their cylindrical shape is regular, but their size changes the operation around them. Large cranes lift each section from the quay and lower it through the ship's open hatch, while workers inside the hold guide the final position. Here, clearance becomes almost as important as lifting capacity. The suspended section must remain correctly oriented while passing between the ship's structure, the crane, and cargo already positioned below. A small rotation at the hook can become a much larger movement at the far end of a long component. The lift is not simply upward and downward. It follows a carefully managed path through limited space. Some industrial components make even that lifting method impractical. The amine absorber shown here is carried on a self-propelled modular transporter, or SPMT, a platform supported by many closely spaced wheel units beneath the load. Instead of concentrating the component's weight at a few conventional truck axles, the transporter supports it across a much larger footprint. The SPMT also allows the entire component and its support system to move together. As the transporter approaches Combi Dock 3, the cargo does not have to be lifted from a trailer and suspended in the air simply to cross onto the vessel. It can be maneuvered directly aboard while remaining supported from below. The load can therefore cross onto the ship without surrendering its support to a crane. At this scale, the route, deck access, transporter position, available clearance, and supporting structure all have to work together. Cargo handling has become a transport project in its own right. Other project cargo still has to leave the ground completely. A large hydraulic piling hammer is assembled and handled aboard MV Trina using the vessel's lifting equipment. The footage shows workers around the yellow components, connections being prepared, and a major section being lowered into the cargo hold. Unlike the long wind tower sections, this load combines concentrated mass with a tall, compact geometry. The operation has to manage not only where the component travels, but how it approaches the connection below. As the suspended section nears its position, large movements give way to small corrections. The crane may have moved the load through meters of open space, but the final positioning is determined over a much smaller distance. Workers inspect connections and guide the assembly because the component has to meet the structure beneath it in the correct orientation before it can be secured. Project Cargo brings several earlier problems together. Support, clearance, lifting geometry, alignment, and securing all have to be considered at the same time. And transport still solves only part of the journey. Eventually, an oversized component has to leave the logistics system and become part of the structure it was built for. Project Cargo reveals an important distinction. Reaching the site is not the same as completing the job. For the final section of the bicycle bridge between Queek and Mook, the large beam first arrives on a specialized multi-axle transporter. The vehicle solves the problem of moving a long structure over the road, but once it reaches the installation area, that support system has done all it can. Now the load has to change support again. Rigging is connected, the crane takes the weight, and the beam begins to leave the transporter. At this moment, the operation becomes less about transportation and more about geometry. The suspended section has to clear the equipment around it while remaining correctly oriented. Workers watch the movement from several positions, guiding the beam as the crane carries it toward the opening in the structure. As the distance to the final position decreases, the size of the required corrections decreases as well. A transporter can move a component across kilometers. A crane can move it through meters of open space. Final installation, however, is decided within much smaller tolerances, where unwanted rotation or lateral movement can prevent two structures from meeting correctly. The footage follows the operation into the night, when artificial lighting takes over around the installation area. By this stage, the objective is no longer simply to keep the beam moving, it is to place it where movement must finally stop. Once positioned, the beam is no longer merely a transported load, it is ready to serve its structural purpose. For the final operation in this journey, even solid ground disappears. The next load must be lowered through moving water and positioned on the seabed. The bridge installation ended at a fixed structure. Here, there is no solid working surface at all. Off Ushant Island, the Sabella D10 tidal turbine has to reach its final position on the seabed. The last stage of this journey combines marine logistics, lifting, cable handling, diving, and precise positioning. The process begins with the electrical route. From the working vessel and smaller support craft, crews handle cable equipment at the surface while divers work below. Underwater footage shows them following and manipulating the cable near the seabed, with sections secured in position. Installing the turbine alone would accomplish very little. The machine ultimately has to become part of a larger system capable of carrying power away from its offshore position. Then the central load arrives. The D10 structure sits aboard the installation vessel, while crews prepare the lifting operation and its jumper cable. Survey personnel check the operation from shore and vessel-side working areas as the lifting team prepares the turbine for deployment. The same engineering problems developed throughout this documentary now converge in one operation. The crane still has to take the load cleanly. The rigging has to preserve orientation. The vessel has to provide a sufficiently stable working platform. Unlike the bridge beam, however, the turbine cannot simply be guided toward a visible foundation from solid ground. The load has to pass through the water. As the turbine is lifted from the vessel and lowered toward the seabed, accurate placement depends on coordination between the crane, vessel position, survey information, and conditions at sea. Once the structure disappears beneath the surface, direct visual contact becomes limited. The project later returns to the cable system. Crews work aboard the vessel at night as equipment associated with the export cable and turbine jumper is prepared for connection. Project Cargo had to retain stability and orientation as it moved from one support system to another. Final installation demanded the greatest precision of all.